This VAWatchdog.org news video is brought to you by Bergman & Moore, LLC. Former VA attorneys now fighting VA for you. Call Bergman & Moore at 877-838-2889 or on the web at vetlawyers.com.
For American and NATO troops in Afghanistan, the fighting has been getting tougher, and the Taliban has been extending its reach all over the country, even into the capital, Kabul. American casualties since the Afghan war began in October 2001 are reaching 500 dead. Afghan civilian deaths also have been increasing, and that has drawn complaints from President Karzai. Contributing writer Elizabeth Rubin was in northeastern Afghanistan with an American military unit last fall. Her report recently appeared in the New York Times Sunday magazine, and she joins us now. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Tell us about the Valley and the group of soldiers. This is Captain Dan Kearney and his men, and I noticed the title is Captain Kearney's Quagmire. You really focused in on him and his men. Tell us about them.
Well, they're called Battle Company. It's one of the companies of the battalion. There's about 3 platoons out in this valley. The valley is very hostile to American forces. The tribe there practice Wahhabi Islam, which is very different than the rest of Afghanistan. And they have said they want the Americans out of there. There's been an ongoing cycle of attacks by insurgents against Captain Kearney and his soldiers from villagers' houses.
From the houses. And this is the problem that you write up, that they face all the time,
That's
right?
right.
Is what to do about those attacks.
Exactly. And the reason I started to focus particularly on Kearney is because he's the commander on the ground of these forces. He's alone out there. He has his battalion commander back at base, but he's making decisions every day. What do I do? Do I fire back at the house, possibly kill a civilian, and anger the villagers even more? Or do I let them possibly kill one of my troops?
You talked about them having to be what you called cultural anthropologists, in fact, as well as soldiers and killers. What does that mean?
Well, they're having to define the valley in terms of tribe, in terms of family, trying to make inroads as a cultural anthropologist would into the political and cultural factors in that valley so that they can find friends and win the villagers over. And in order to do that, they have to understand the economy, how marriage is based, everything. At the same time, you know, Kearney is constantly having to worry about his soldiers who are going out on patrols and getting ambushed almost, 3 times a week.
And you had unusual access to these soldiers.
Yeah, this particular group is they're very open with journalists. I credit the battalion commander, William Oslin, the colonel there, who takes the attitude that if you have suggestions how we can make this better, that's great. Come in and see what we're doing.
And because of the access and because of the clear openness, the reader can see the enormous stress that is on these men.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just the captain or the colonel who's making these decisions. It's the soldiers, it's the platoon lieutenants, it's the enlisted guy. Every single day they're out there, and this is an unusual place. It's probably the most volatile place in Afghanistan besides Helmand. They are in contact with the enemy, as I said, several times a week. And always the question is, what do we do when they're firing from a house where there's a family?
You went on one 6-day mission that you described where there were several ambushes and Americans killed. Tell us about that mission and what happened.
Well, it was going into they air assaulted into a village they'd not been to.
By helicopter.
By helicopter in the evening. And when they first got there the first night, they had intelligence that there were insurgents around the soldiers who were landing by helicopter. Kearney then had to make a decision that night. What do I do? Do I call in airstrikes to protect my soldiers? Do I let the insurgents attack? And they had different groups of insurgents all over the place, but it was a populated village. And he decided to attack them. Many insurgents were killed, but civilians also were killed and injured. And that sort of set the stage for the next 5 days. The insurgents and the villagers decided to fight back.
Let me stop you for a second.
Sure.
There's a photo that I was interested in. Shows I guess it's the colonel, the battalion commander, a few miles away, watching the action.
Right.
So this decision to be about whether to bomb the village is made by a number of people? How does it work?
Well, the way that it works is Kearney, as the commander on the ground, in this particular instance, for example, will call back to the colonel, who is watching from a predator feed. You know, the predator is the unmanned drone that sends back infrared images of heat sources. So it can see both men on the ground and in areas where they shouldn't be. They know the area very well. They know if there's men in the mountains on walkie-talkies, that those are bad guys, as they say. And so he will talk to his battalion commander and decide, what are we going to do about these guys? And what are we going to do if they've gone into the house, which they did that night. And the two of them made a decision together that we're going to take out the house. So that's how that works, having somebody back at base watching the other intelligence that's coming in.
And then over the course of the next few days, in this particular case, there were a number of ambushes and American soldiers killed.
That's right. 3 days later, after Kearney met with the elders to sort of talk about what happened, why he was forced to kill civilians and what had happened and why that there were insurgents in the area. A few days later, we were in an area, another ridge on the mountain, and the insurgents actually came up the mountainside and did they attacked from one side, diverting the troops, and crawled up the mountain and came up in close range to the American soldiers, killed one of them, injured two of them, and took their equipment and ran back down the mountain.
The frustration that you describe of the soldiers themselves, Captain Kearney has a fine line as it comes out in your piece of keeping them motivated, but also keeping them peaceful when necessary.
Right. They are, I mean, as he told me, actually, they sent a shrink out to the troops just to see how they're doing, because it's a very stressful situation, and half of them told the shrink that they think that the captain is playing Russian roulette with their lives, and the other half thought he was too weak on the sticking too closely to the rules of engagement. What that means is that they want a little bit more leeway to be on the offensive and not always having to be on the defensive, taking fire from the insurgents. They want to go after them more. And he's constantly having to rein them back in because he knows the effect and the consequences of killing people in the villages, which is you just turn the whole valley against you. So he's always balancing these two things, as he says, balancing plates on my nose.
And I know that there's clearly also a balance of, are they actually doing any good? They seem to be wondering that all the time.
They do.
But at the end of your piece, Captain Kearney says, I lost 7 dudes here. It's too much blood. I don't want to give this up. This is mine. He sounds determined to stay.
He is determined to stay. I mean, he feels we've made a huge sacrifice here, and it's pride, I want to tame this place. I want to make friends with the villagers. I want to bring them around to our side to see what we're doing, that we can bring them good things. If they would side with us and not the insurgents, we can change their lives, help them. A lot of the villagers say we don't want American help. And it's a very, very frustrating place to be in charge of.
All right, Elizabeth Rubin of the New York Times. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
VAWatchdog.org, the nation's #1 independent veterans website. On the web at VAWatchdog.org.